When we talk about social change in the Muslim world, it's so easy to just think of it as a simple clash, right? Old versus new. But the reality, it's way more complex, way more dynamic, and honestly, a lot more fascinating than that. It's really a story about constant negotiation and reinvention. And to really get our heads around it, we need a guide.
And our guide for this whole discussion is going to be the chapter Social Change by the scholar Ebrahim Musa. We're going to be digging into his framework, his key ideas, to really understand this incredible process of, well, traditions in the making.
And Musa kicks things off with this really powerful idea. This isn't just one single story. It's about numerous experiments. Think about that. Some have worked out, some not so much. But they are all attempts to figure out how to navigate a world that is changing at lightning speed. And it's that spirit of experimentation that we're going to explore.
So what's the backdrop for all these experiments? Well, Musa describes it as a world in flux, a world where the very fabric of tradition feels like it's fraying under all this modern pressure.
And believe me, these pressures are coming from literally every direction. You've got big ideas like nationalism and socialism clashing with liberal capitalism and this intense religious fervor, and all of this is happening while communities are still grappling with the legacies of occupation. Musa has a great phrase for it. He calls it a vertiginous intersection of forces. It's like every single thread of tradition is being pulled at once.
So what happens when you have all that pressure? Well, the result, Musa says, is something he calls a sense of the poisoned mood. It's this widespread feeling of victimhood and grievance, often fueled by conspiracy theories, that makes any kind of constructive social change incredibly difficult. I mean, just imagine trying to build something new and hopeful in that kind of atmosphere.
Okay, so, faced with this fraying fabric and this poisoned mood, what's the response? This is where we get to Musa's huge central idea, traditions in the making. The whole point is that tradition isn't some static relic in a museum. It's alive. It's something that is constantly being remade.
This quote just brilliantly illustrates the whole thing. I love this metaphor. Picture a weaver. Some are trying to do what he calls invisible mends, right? Just patching up the old fabric so perfectly you can't even see the repair. But others are being bolder. They're actively trying to weave new fibers right into the tradition, creating a totally new pattern. This image of weaving and mending, it's absolutely crucial for understanding the different paths people are taking. All right, so let's look at that first path, the one that wants to restore the fabric to how it supposedly was, to a perfect, original state. This whole approach is about imagining a pure past. So the mindset here is that centuries of history and culture and all that messy human interpretation, they're like layers of dust and grime, accretions, as Musa calls them, that have covered up the real, pristine, true Islam. So the goal is to just strip all of that away. Get rid of it, and get back to the original source, completely untouched by human hands.
And this really lays out the two big opposing views perfectly. On one side, you have this idea of tradition as a perfect, unchanging thing, almost like an escape route from messy reality. But on the other side, you have the understanding that tradition is something that's lived and breathed, something that you just can't separate from history and culture. It's really a clash between a pure ideal and a very complex reality.
But what about that other path? This is the really interesting one. Instead of trying to go back to the past, this approach is all about actively reweaving the fabric for right here, right now.
Now, a huge part of this reweaving means rethinking some pretty big concepts. Take Sharia. It's so often misunderstood as just a rigid set of ancient laws. But Musa explains that its literal meaning is the trodden path. So it's more like a moral compass, an ethical guide for a community on its journey. It's not some static, unchangeable destination.
What this all boils down to is that this entire approach sees tradition as a living, breathing thing. The goal isn't just blind obedience, but it's not outright rejection either. It's about active engagement, really wrestling with these ideas intellectually and ethically to find meaning for today.
And the great poet-philosopher Muhammad Iqbal just captured this spirit perfectly. He urged modern Muslims to use their penetrative thought and fresh experience, and to courageously proceed to the work of reconstruction. That's a call to action, not a retreat into some imagined past. It's about building. Okay, but how? Practically speaking, how does somebody actually reweave? What are the tools you need for this work of reconstruction? Well, the most important tool of all is the art of interpretation.
This simple case study on ritual washing is just a perfect example. You have a single verse in the Quran,
And it leads to two totally different practices, washing the feet versus wiping the feet. And it's all because of a really subtle point of grammar. So what's the big takeaway? It's that even on the most basic, seemingly literal level, human interpretation is always there. It's inescapable.
You know, the Quran itself, as Mosa points out, offers some beautiful metaphors for this whole process. There's the allegory of the bee. It describes the bee going to all the different fruits and flowers to produce something totally new and healing. The point isn't to stick to just one source. It's this divine encouragement of creativity, of finding wisdom and remedy from, as he says, multiple sources.
And that brings us right back to Iqbal, who gives us this incredibly powerful vision for the modern weaver, with reason as your shield and the sword of love in your hand. Wow. I mean, that's such an inspiring call to combine critical thinking with deep compassion, to actively go out and shape your own destiny, to grasp what you aspire to, instead of just accepting what's handed to you.
So we end up right back where we started, with that powerful image of a fabric. If tradition really is this living tapestry, something that is constantly being remade, then the really vital question is for us, right here, today. In a world with all of these unprecedented challenges, what new fibers do you think are most needed to reweave tradition? That right there is the ongoing work of reconstruction.